Right, it's about a minute after 9 p.m. Hello and welcome to the very first edition of InFocus, a program that aims at putting a spotlight on the current affairs issues and, of course, some of the burning issues of the day. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Great to be back, and of course, would love to hear from you. We've been a trending topic throughout from midday. And of course, the hashtag is InFocusRW. You simply need to add that to your tweets. And you can tweet at RBA Rwanda or tweet me directly at Eugene Anangwe. Tonight, the focus is on women and power. In just a bit, I'll be introducing our power panel. Stay with us. All right, thank you so much for joining us. It is definitely in focus. And of course, on the program today, we have an all-women panel. Of course, very able and strong-willed. And let me just introduce them to you. Alice Urusaro, thank you so much for joining us on the program. She is a scholar and, of course, a gender activist, a brain behind the 16 Days of Activism. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Also on the program is Olive Maria, not new on RBA. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you as well.
All right, and of course we have a woman member of parliament who is Dr. Kanengo Juliana, a former vice president of the Pan-African Parliament. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Perfect. So we're talking about women and power. And power in this sense of political power, power in the sense of socio-economic spheres, power in the sense of being able to stand out and be counted. And if we look today, if we start from the perspective of the numbers of the women that we have in parliament, 64%, more than half of the members of parliament in Rwanda. But the key question that we're looking at as we move towards the election in August is the impact of these numbers. Because sometimes people say numbers, yes, but what is the impact on the ground as far as uplifting other women and, of course, raising their standards? I'll start with you, Honorable Juliana, because sometimes most people, when you start asking them to assess themselves, they'll tell you, no, ask the people to assess me. But I'm going to put you on the spotlight on this one. What do you think has been the impact of these major numbers of women members of parliament in Rwanda?
Thank you very much. I think we have to first look at the context from which we are speaking from. We're looking at a point in time where our women are 64%
yes.
in parliament. It's a majority women parliament. We're coming from a situation where at one point, not in the far past, in Rwanda, we didn't have any members of parliament. When you look at the history of post-independence Rwanda, post-independent Rwanda, there's a time that we had one woman, a time that we didn't have, run down up to coming to 1994. I think the highest had ever been was 14%. By the time we were going for our first democratically elected elections in 2003 after the constitution, we were a maximum of 21%. And this is the team that worked behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to work and ensure that other women do come and join. And today we're talking about the 64%, but there's a history to that.
Right, the history we know about it.
Yeah.
Of course, we cannot overlook it.
Yeah.
But the question here, I'm going to push you harder on this, because what I'm asking here is, right, we have had a very major increase in the numbers in parliament. But what has been the impact on the ground as far as, uplifting other women is concerned? What can women in grassroots point out and say, if it were not for those women parliamentarians, I would not be celebrating this privilege today?
Exactly. So when I was giving the history, I was trying to show you that even getting the numbers is part of the achievement. Number two, when the numbers did come, over time, different issues that affect the women were being brought up to the fore. Not necessarily by these women who are seated in parliament, but by building coalitions with women in civil society, with researchers. Issues that affect women were being brought to the fore. With that evidence, I remember when it was brought to the attention of the Rwanda government that there was need to accelerate the the women in decision-making positions, it had to do with the research that had just been published by one of the women organizations. So with those researches, you feed it to the existing women who are, so to put it, in the corridors of power, and they are able to lobby using information they get from other women groups. But there's that necessity, first of all, to build that network.
And you feel that, first of all, in its own self is an achievement.
And in doing that, we were able, going back, it's been over time, to review all the different laws that do have discriminatory clauses discriminating women. Like the most recent one, when it comes to in the penal code, when a woman would be caught in adultery, should be imprisoned, but a man would not.
And this,
how do you explain that?
The 64% claim credit to this.
Not necessarily 64%. I said over time, different bills were being enacted at different times. The land law. Today, you know that women can access, rather have a right to own land, which is not a very common thing in Africa. It's something that we may take for granted now that we have it in Rwanda, but it has a history to that.
All right. I'm gonna bring you back on this, but let's bring Alice in this conversation. Alice, do you think I'm being too unfair to Honorable Juliana? Do the 64% have an obligation of single-handedly saying, you know what, since we have these numbers, then our clarion call is actually to uplift this number of women or fellow women who have this particular issue that have been affecting them for years? You know, is it their obligation? Are they obliged to do it?
First of all, let's clarify one thing. There are two issues you've been speaking about at the same time. One is the question of impact,
yes,
which is the meaning of having elected people and what they do to the society to improve it.
Yes.
On the other hand, you have also the issue, an issue that is more of an activist issue, an activist agenda for women's right, women's movement, wanting that once women are in power, they will necessarily uplift
bring their fellow
younger women or women not being in the political sphere. So those two issues are debatable. Of course, the first idea that comes to mind is, well, why the question of impact is only being asked to women? And why the question, why should we take for granted that every woman who is in the political sphere has an activist agenda? So this is how I see the thing. We have to clarify those things. That said, the question of impact, it's true that women, as the men who are elected, are expected to change their society. They are technically, or they are expected to be the agent of change that we elect to improve our living.
Is it wrong to have those expectations?
No, nothing is wrong, but we have to clarify what we want from them. So I think this question has to be asked, and perhaps this is what my sister was trying to answer by speaking about how they have been able to impact politics, and particularly what Rwanda prides itself with is to have a legal framework, legal and political framework that ensure protection as well as enjoyment of rights. So that's one, the examples she has given. And the other thing that is more problematic, more debatable for those who are not activists, we should not assume that any woman in position of power, political or not, has a feminist agenda in the sense of uplifting other women out there.
But that brings me to the question which I'll bring in Olive here. So why are they there? If they are not going to impact the society by uplifting or empowering or even motivating other women to also come and be part of these elective positions?
Thank you. I think I will just speak from a rights perspective. I think looking at the history of the country, it only made sense that half of the population had to contribute to development. It's common sense to me. So I think looking at the history, we said, how can we make sure that the women are also contributing to building the country, particularly at the community level, and making sure that they are also participating in development. So I feel the numbers, we have great numbers in terms of the 64% that was mentioned, but we also need to look at the realities on the ground.
What are those realities?
What are the realities on the ground?
What are they in your opinion?
Yes, I think the numbers have helped tremendously to look at the rest of the women in the communities, be inspired, and say, I can also do it. I can also be a leader, not just in my community, but also in my household. Because power and leadership starts from the community. So I feel it's giving a lot of sense to the rest of the women in terms of really understanding that the issues can be addressed. The second thing for me, I feel, is that as a woman, it's easier to understand the issues of women. There was a lot of momentum that was built to really try and understand what are the issues that women face on the ground every day so that they can be there in parliament and see it and actually adopt laws that are able to represent the issues of women. So I feel it's not just numbers, it's also to understand that, yes, it's half of the country, but also they understand the issues of women. That way they are able to represent them in a more effective manner. And that does not mean men do not understand. Of course they do, I mean, to an extent. But you also need to look at it in terms of, it's a right that is, for me, I feel it's a right that they have to contribute because they're half of the population.
Right. Honorable Juliana, she says, as parliamentarians who are in parliament, as women, you have that sort of mandate or responsibility to also support in helping formulate laws that are actually touching on sensitive issues that touch on women. But if you go on the grassroots, even throughout the day, several people have been sending in their thoughts on this issue. And they say that the women in the informal sector seem to be on their own. And they seem to be asking, where are those leaders of ours who should be speaking for us? A case in point is the women vendors, for example. When you see several pictures that do rounds on social media of them being, sometimes manhandled in one way or another by those who are supposed to, get them off the streets, it is wanting. It's a wanting image. And no one hears the voice of any woman member of parliament coming out to say, this has to stop. Is it perhaps the reason that Alice said that not all women parliamentarians have a feminism agenda in parliament?
Well, much as I agree with my sister Liz that not every woman who gets into a position of power must or is required to
feels.
It's not automatic. You may develop it along, you may not even associate with it, or you may be sympathetic to it or an activist yourself. I think there's a whole range of spectrum where the different women fall. But when it comes to being sensitive to the issues on the ground, the actual issues on the ground, especially the women on the grassroots are facing, I think the women do come out. We know that there are certain strategies that have been adopted by the city of Kigali. They may not be necessarily encompassing each and every woman, but policies are choices that we make. Do the women parliamentarians want to side with increasing the number of vendors on the road? Do they want to have an alternative strategy? I think the women parliamentarians are for the alternative strategy, which was what the city of Kigali was doing, because we were concerned about what are the alternatives that are being offered. But at the same time, we also know what are the available resources that in time are able to accommodate those women on the streets. So it's not that we sit back and they don't feel it. We are concerned. We speak for them for different issues. It's not only just the women vendors, even access to credit, issues of how do they access credit. issues on how they are represented even at the very grassroots level. We speak for them on different occasions. So it's not true that, coming to women who may not necessarily be having an affirmative agenda, a feminist agenda.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it's difficult to really stand by the wayside and look at it from that when you're a female parliamentarian, because the way we are structured here in Rwanda, I'm speaking from what is on the ground, we all belong as of, it's a requirement. I mean, automatically, we all belong to the Rwanda Women Parliamentarians Forum. And this is a forum where we all meet. When you're coming from East-West, you come and you start learning what are the issues, how to be sensitive to women's issues. We actually undergo that training. We undergo the training to get to learn how do we reflect those concerns into the daily practice of what we do in terms of the way we are registrating, in terms of the way we're making our representation. So whether you are a feminist at the beginning or not, over time, you develop that sensitivity towards the actual issues that are affecting the women. We feel we belong to them. We feel that expectation is heavy on us, on our shoulders. So it's not that it's not easy to find a Rwandan woman parliamentarian feeling that, well, since feminism is not my background, it was not part and parcel of how I came here, I'm going to stand aside. No. Somehow you got brought into the loop and you go along.
But feeling it and acting upon it are two different things. When I look at the presence of women in politics in Rwanda after the genocide, I look at it in different waves. We have had strong activism and strong alliance and coalition building between government and civil society in the 90s, where in 99, for the first local elections, there has been a huge move from the Ministry of Gender to try and mobilize women to to get elected. So this wave has been there, and the build-up has been up to 2003. At the time, it wasn't given. So there was a cause out there to fight for. So the sensitivity was pretty dominant among women, whom for most of them were coming from non-governmental organizations where they were used to fight for that case. Then you have had, after 2003 elections, it was taken for granted somehow, which is good in a sense, and which is the impact I think my sister Olive was mentioning about. So one great thing and one major impact has been that it is now taken for granted that women have space here in the public sphere. Whether or not they utilize that or they expand that, that's another question. But that one is given. It goes also with weakening this activist agenda that is there. There are younger women now in parliament who do not know of a world where women were not allowed in. So the impact is also that our society, women and men, are now naturalizing the presence of women in public sphere.
Right.
So that's the great impact. And that's when I think is the result of not only the action that is real of women parliamentarians, including through the forum, in my view, it is also the overall, overarching politics of Rwanda that is very much in that direction.
Right.
So you have as early as in the discussion of around the Vision 2020 in 99, having that affirmation of recognition of all citizens.
Right.
So we are witnessing what has happened. And perhaps if we leave a bit the sphere of number, I think one thing I'm observing that is very interesting here is how much younger women perceive their place in this society. It's very interesting when you go, you see the aspirations. When you listen to younger women today and younger girls, I have the privilege to meet them sometime. How many young women now are creating business for themselves? Mm-hmm. Business for women, including in the non-traditional fields, mm-hmm. like 2 women owning a bar. So this is something that wasn't thinkable sometimes back.
They've taken over that particular space. But we will delve a bit deeper into that. But mm-hmm. despite the fact that we have this very great environment that you just mentioned mm-hmm. For women in terms of the empowerment, mm-hmm. the available opportunities, mm-hmm. the 64%, which I'm still going to go back to. Mm-hmm. But when we look at key and very most powerful elective positions, mm-hmm. we are not seeing the same number. For example, we are going to mm-hmm. elections in August. Some people said it's too soon to rule out, women candidates for mm-hmm. the presidential position. Mm-hmm. But why are we not seeing more of them coming up to vie for this very powerful position? Have they automatically shied off and said this is just restricted for the men? Or what is the issue? You have been in parliament, the Pan-African Parliament. You have the experience. Why are you not vying for president, for example?
We already have had 2 women presidents in Africa, don't forget.
Talk of Rwanda.
Yeah, in Rwanda, I think since we started, since 2003, we've always had a woman candidate.
Only one?
Well, there's only one position of presidency, so...
Right, one woman candidate.
Yeah, but, well, even having a woman thinking about it,
yeah.
That's why I'm saying we have a history to that. Let's not forget that though we are 64%, in which space of time have we managed to get all that? Mm-hmm. So, Alice did well. She really brought out the entire, the overarching politics of the country. How long have we been in this race? Mm-hmm. And also, 2003, it's a landmark time because that's when we made our constitution, mm-hmm. and that's when we made the affirmative action of at least 30%. Yeah. She talked about the previous activism. Have you ever watched people running a marathon? When you are reaching the finishing line, you are tired, but you put in more energy. Mm-hmm. I think we are almost reaching our finishing line because we were fighting for that affirmative action. Women organizations, women activists were speaking out, were lobbying left and right. But here, we were having many men getting on board. That was our finishing line. When we got into the constitution, all the Rwandans acknowledged, yes, it's high time we affirm that women have equal rights as citizens, like my sister was putting it. So that was our finishing line in terms of us qualifying, because previously women and children were not regarded as relevant. Yeah, relevant. So that was our finishing line in terms of us telling Rwandans, or Rwandans declaring that, yes, men and women are equal before the law. Then thereafter, how much do we, I think the issue should be how much are we expanding our space, like you put it.
Right.
Yeah, we expanded in numbers, 64%, but also little by little, because it's incremental. We coming from, like it or not, from equally a heavily patriarchal society like any across the globe. Mm. So little by little, we are making big chunks of where we are getting it off. Mm-hmm. In Rwanda, to own land, for generations, nobody, even the women themselves, took it for granted that, yeah, it's not our space to own land. It was unheard of. So you pick your little brother to go and do the negotiation when you are the one remaining alive. Mm. So after the genocide, it became very evident that, hold on, this was not proper. If the only surviving member of the family is a woman, what's going to happen? Are you going to look for a relative or some distant friend to come and stand for you? Mm-hmm. So it was evident that it was necessary for women to also have that voice. And land goes with any other property. Once in Rwanda you chunk of land, then the rest of the property falls in line.
Yeah, right, yeah. But before we go for the break, you mentioned the issue of little by little.
Yeah.
Why are we seemingly comfortable in the little by little when we have an environment, a leader, president, who is a he for she, creates a political environment and security and opportunities? Why do we seem to be so comfortable with
in terms of
little
law?
by little?
In terms of law and policy, it's not little by little. We are making very big
So what's
strides.
stopping you from also moving in the same pace?
In terms of practice,
Let me tell you, here I'm making decisions.
Yeah.
In Parliament, I'm making decisions. I'm able to influence. I've learned the skills of negotiating and influencing a bill in whatever I want it, in whichever direction I want it to go. I take the floor of Parliament and argue it out. Even when the men were still the majority, we could still influence them. But when it comes to household level, when it comes to family setting, how much decision-making power am I wielding as a woman?
All right. Hold that thought. We're going to take a very short break right now. We're going to come back and, of course, pick it up from there. And, of course, I want to say a big thank you to those who are actually joining us on Twitter. I have Alice, Kaiba and Julian, who is actually saying that why are we not seeing any political aspirations, even at presidential level, from Rwandan women? It's a question I'd actually asked you. We'll come back. We'll dig in a bit about it. The hashtag is InFocusRW. Another tweet writer from Eric Mahoro who says, however, we won't just celebrate the numbers. We need to see more done for those who aren't elites, often excluded. This is what he's actually saying, that apart from the numbers that we are throwing flowers on ourselves on, what impact, what are we having on the ground? We have one from the Rwanda police. Thank you so much for actually tweeting. And the Rwanda police Twitter handle says, do we still need the affirmative action on Rwanda, or Rwanda has matured enough to not need it? When we come back, we'll be digging deeper into this particular tweet. Keep tweeting InFocusRW. That's a Twitter hashtag that we're using tonight, and that is what we're following on you right there. You can tweet me directly at Eugene Anangwe or at RBA Rwanda. We are back in a moment. Stay with us.
Now that is the smell of a new day, new business ideas, new opportunities, and above all, a new chance to start over. Forget about the news. We want to talk about the stocks that are trading, what companies have been listed, and the exchange rate, and also the money matters, not just regionally, but also globally. Take a look. They are the right arm of every business world. The small-scale businesses, they contribute a lot to our economies, and yet they face new challenges every single day. Now, I come in to stop all that. Listen to them, find a common ground, and come up with a solution. And I also give you an insight into the opportunities in their business world. Join us every Tuesday on Business Digest.
Right, thank you so much for still being with us. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. This is In Focus, a program that aims at putting a spotlight on the major current affairs issues and the burning issues of the day. You can get in touch with us. All you need to do, if you're tweeting, tweet at I'm Eugene Anangwe, or at RBA Rwanda. Or better yet, just use the hashtag InFocusRW. We'll definitely just click on it and we'll be able to trace and track your comments right there. And of course, tonight on the program, we're talking about the issue of women and power. And our panelists right here on the program are definitely giving us great insights. Before we went for the break, we had feedback, and of course you also wanted to jump in on an issue. But before we jump into that particular issue that you wanted to share your thoughts on, let's talk about this tweet that just came on the issue of affirmative action, because there's been growth. We have seen, based on what Alice had just said earlier on concerning the opportunities that we have, the environment that we have, and it begs to ask, do we still need the affirmative action, or Rwandan women have now reached, for lack of a better word? Olive.
Yes, we still do, for a number of reasons. One, although we have achieved more than 50% in parliament, look at the local levels. We still have lower numbers. On average, 40% of the positions occupied by women, which means 60% are men, even though we still have affirmative action. And in addition, you need to look at what positions women are occupying. If you look at, for example, the vice mayor in charge of economic affairs, more than 70% of the positions are occupied by men, while the traditional social affair positions, the majority, are occupied by women. So what does that mean? Although we don't want to see just the numbers, we also need to look at what lies behind the numbers. So I think for me, we still need that. Just because it's written and we've achieved it, average in many spheres in life, it does not mean we are having the right numbers. And in addition to that, we also need to look at why women are still not occupying those positions, as we mentioned. My sister from the academia will tell you how many women are occupying these kinds of top positions, especially the positions that are traditionally viewed as positions for men. So for me, we still have a long way to go. The numbers are just that, but we are not seeing the changes that we are seeing. And then also it was mentioned the patriarchal system. You also need to look at why are women not occupying certain positions. We have so many reasons. There was a research that was done by civil society last year in terms of why we still have low numbers in certain positions and why women are actually not occupying these positions. And so some of the things that they revealed was that actually women still don't have the required fabric in terms of support from the family, from the communities to feel they can run for these positions. And in addition, look at how many unpaid care work that women do. They don't have time to run after and be in another, leadership position when we can recognize that they still have a lot of burden in terms of what they do, when they are expected to be carers in the family, and they are still also expected to be home on time and cook for their husbands. I mean, there are these gender stereotypes that are still there that expect that women, as much as we are putting in front that they need to be in positions of leadership, there is still a lot that is pulling them back. Right. And so we need to address that as well. Right.
So are you trying to say that Honorable Juliana and her colleagues in Parliament have not done their job properly in easing this burden on the women? This is sort of what she's trying to say. Is this the case?
I'm back at my process. When it comes to practice, I was just saying, when it comes to law and policy, we can sit down and change it in a day. But when it comes to changing cultural practices, you can't do it in a day. It's a process. Because there are several actors involved. One, the woman herself may not be empowered enough. Well, you may say we've not reached out enough, but I don't think it's only women parliamentarians. The woman herself may not be empowered enough to feel she needs to take up. She needs to claim for her rights. But the man also that is letting go of certain privileges that he has taken for granted, because that's the way his mother brought him up, that's the way their father brought him up, that's how the grandfather and grandmother behaved. So all those, you don't do them in such a short time. So we're talking about how many years that we've been in that parliament. It's not a long time enough in terms of changing cultural practices. Right. So those are the little the chunks that we're taking slowly. But in terms of registration and policy, we've moved a great deal. We are actually doing very well. That's why it is easy to change. That's why in Parliament we can make it 64%.
But someone will ask, what's the point of legislation when it doesn't impact? It doesn't have an impact on the ground.
But how do you say, how do we know that there's no impact?
Right.
Because, well, first of all, coming just back on the question of the relevance today of affirmative action, I will, without hesitation, say we still need, but we have a deeper question we have to ask ourselves. By addressing the normative issue of correcting injustice, women have suffered forever. Are we trying also to shift society to have a minority of men somewhere? What are we after? Because it may, if we continue discussing numbers the way we are doing it, we risk to have it as an end on itself.
When it's not.
There is a real question of correcting injustice, but we should not create injustice. And also, what do we want afterwards? We want improvement in our society. Let's take, it is exciting to think about places where traditionally women have been absent, and to have women in the construction and so on. But in my everyday work, I work on peace and security. And I've been looking at the numbers coming out of the Rwanda National Police and Rwanda Defense Force. So do we want, if we want only the numbers, we might find that women will enter a territory where they are not the best to perform, the best performers. Because of the legislations that exist, today any Rwandan woman can claim to enter the army. But there are also very concrete steps, requirements for an army to perform. If a specific lady is not able to meet those requirements,
you will not make
should she be in the army because of the numbers? Because Rwanda, we have the privilege of having reached a point where we need to ask ourselves deeper questions. So, should we, for everything, have the numbers? And where do we stop in the numbers? And what matters? So those questions, unfortunately, are not being asked. Because, and also it's not, we are having elections next year. Parliamentary, no.
Oh, parliamentary, yes.
Yes. So it will be very interesting to ask ourselves, are women parliamentarians going to secure the gains?
She's here.
To slide back or to want more?
Right.
Let's say for the last option, to want more. Okay, suppose the agenda is to have 75% of women. We have also to ask ourselves the difficult questions. To do what? What is it that the numbers are bringing to us? Rwanda has the privilege today to ask itself that question. Not saying that, notwithstanding that it's not in all sectors that we have corrected this imbalance.
Right.
But we have to ask ourselves, if, for example, military military job is about defense of countries, of security, should we allow ourselves to have affirmative action only
for the sake of getting numbers?
For the sake of getting it, or what matters can be the capacity to defend the security of Rwandans.
Right.
But
Those
I think we're
hard
also
questions
tackling,
have to be
but
asked as well.
I think we're also tackling that from the empowerment and education perspective.
But as you answer that, as you bring that, let's also look at the girl power movements.
Yes.
And the feminists, you know, in terms of where are they and what role should they be playing? Have we left everything in the feet of the women parliamentarians? Where do people like you who are feminists come in?
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to mention.
Yes.
Feminism does not mean women. And men can also be feminists. It's really about understanding that we believe in the equality of the sexes. So I think that's what I wanted to mention, the education perspective. We are doing a lot to empower young girls to be able to understand that you can also apply and be in the army. Traditionally, this is meant as something that we know men occupy that. But what are we telling our young girls that they can also be able to do that?
Are you doing it? Are you doing it?
Yes, I think especially
And
with the civil society, and it is working. If you look at a lot of young ladies that are coming up really strongly understanding that their self-esteem, that self-esteem is not associated with your looks and how you look, but really what brains do you have and how are you able to have businesses, as she was saying. A lot of young girls are having businesses, they are entrepreneurs. So this is the mind, I think, that we are trying to shift and understand that. Also, how are the boys supporting the girls in terms of empowerment? We're not just talking about girls' empowerment, it's also about boys and how they are contributing to the country, the development of the country. So I think that's what feminism is trying to do. We're trying to say, how are we able to share equitably and fairly the resources that are there and the opportunities that the country has given us to be able to seize that and make sure that we are not just talking about the numbers. We're also talking about growth in GDP, we're talking about growth in families, we are talking about the growth of the country generally. Yeah.
But the real picture that we see, even on social media, when it comes to feminism, when someone hears feminism, many have felt that there's a lack of understanding of what feminism is and what it should be. In many instances, feminists have been seen as even those who are actually causing even more trouble for fellow women, because they seem to bring this confrontational approach to equality, you know, and in many cases, it's been seen as we are standing only on the side of the females. And we don't care about what is happening to the men, because for many years, men have been on top there, so it's our turn. How has this affected the empowerment of women, if you look at it from that perspective?
I think there are different perspectives to feminism as to where, but I think the core is about social justice.
Yes.
We're talking about social justice. We are talking about women's rights being human rights. So if we agree on that, then it is easy. You may to call yourself a feminist, or you may brand feminist to be Western or whatever, but the core issue is women's rights are human rights, and then how do we achieve social justice within our society? When you look at this woman going to cultivate with her husband, she's carrying both hoes, then she has her kid strapped on her back, then she's 8 months pregnant, and then she's putting the 2 goats, and the husband is smoking, just pocketing, going to... I mean, the moment the husband will look back and say, maybe it's high time I start to pull the 2 goats, and maybe this baby who is strapped on her back, because she's carrying another one, maybe I could assist her, we go to cultivate and I carry the hose. You know, because, I mean, if she's your wife, why should you overburden her? She's not a beast of burden, she's your wife. She's not a beast of burden. So the moment I see it and I say, please, that woman, she may be a number that might increase the maternal mortality rate, because she's carrying a baby, she's being overburdened. Yeah. So what I'm saying, while I'm talking about, I could be a health personnel talking about the health of this woman, I'm already advancing social justice. I'm talking from the perspective of this woman who is suffering. So then you could label me a feminist.
Right. Can I also add that it doesn't matter whether you label yourself or not, as long as you believe in equality and social justice. And I also have to mention that as Rwandans, as Africans, we are taking feminism and making it contextual. We are looking at the issues on the ground in Africa, in Rwanda. We are not talking about copy-pasting from Europe. We are talking about the realities on the ground, what women are facing, issues like family planning. How are we making sure that women are also contributing to decision-making of what happens to their bodies, and how many children they can decide to have? And how can they also, the men, contribute in terms of the development or care of the family? Because there's this whole misunderstanding that women are supposed to be the carers, they are supposed to be the wholesome, keeping the family together, when it's actually enjoyable also for the man to contribute to the upbringing of the children, to seeing your children, growing up very well. So it's not just about providing and protecting. It's also, taking a decision and being part of the decision making at your household. So right. I feel we are making feminism contextual to the issues on the ground. It's not just something from the Europe.
And I think this answers the question on Twitter by Julian, who had actually asked, please bring to light the difference between girl power movements and feminism. Is it the same thing?
Well, for me, I would like to come back to the true issue. As she says, labeling is relative. You can look at it. But there's I think we are missing some of the changes that are happening, speaking about impact and effect in our society. If you look 20 years down to the road, there are many things that's happening that because we focus on few things that are very important, but that cannot tell the whole story. We miss out on so important changes that are happening. And one of them that is both the result of a political program, political discourse, combined with political discourse, and the inspiration that having women in power are bringing, is you feel in younger ladies, including very young ones, they feel that they have the power to choose. They will have the power to choose a given path for their life. I'll give you very few examples just to substantiate my argument here. In 2013, I decided to, looking at the situation of house girls and the limitations for choice that they had, I decided I'm going to give a job of driver, a first job to female drivers. Because I realized that many ladies that I was having as house girls or I was seeing elsewhere, they were there only because they couldn't do otherwise. It wasn't a choice. Most of the time, either they couldn't study, so they had to earn their living without skills and education. That was the first resort. Or single mothers who dropped out.
So they had no option.
They had no choice. And most of them, because they didn't have options, would not do joyfully that job.
So what's the point?
The point was to offer them opportunity to do otherwise. So I decided that I will hire female drivers. And two of those I've had, one in the interview was telling me, my dream, my vision is to become a taxi driver. And she has been a house girl. So I gave her a first job, which opened to her other opportunities and has improved her social and economic status.
So the moral of the story here is they need opportunities.
They need opportunities, including the ones we don't think about. Because in our programs, NGOs or government would not think about those ones, vocational training. But those who qualify for vocational training have already something more than those girls I'm speaking about.
Right.
So once you give these opportunities, girls are now choosing. My daughter has decided to be the first female saxophonist.
Right. So it's
in
about
Rwanda.
opportunities.
So opportunities are there.
Yes.
So impact, we have to look at impact not only in economic terms.
Right.
We
Even
have to look at the changes in society.
Perfect.
The processes she was speaking about.
Point well taken.
Yeah.
Just because of time limiting factors, there's a question I wanted to ask, because you've talked of opportunities, you've talked of positions in major institutions, and I want to bring Dr. Juliana here, because on 3rd of March in 2004, trying to remember where you were on that day, the internet never forgets. You were giving a paper or a speech on women's participation in electoral processes in post-conflict countries, and you were giving in specific case of Rwanda. And I'll quote you, you said, women occupy senior ranks within the army and the police force. You went on to say that with a lot of pride that we have a woman lieutenant colonel and a deputy commissioner general of police, and these and many others were strong political signals, such that it is no wonder that today, then when you're speaking, a woman holds the portfolio of the minister in the president's office, the minister of justice is a woman, and above all, the president of the Supreme Court is a woman, to mention but a few examples. End of quote. Fast forward, 13 years later, at least we still have Honorable Vanatia, who is actually a minister in the office of the president. And the challenge today is that the Deputy Commissioner General of Police is no longer a woman. A woman is also no longer the head of the Ministry of Justice. The Supreme Court, the Supreme Court, the presidency of the Supreme Court is actually not being held by a woman. That time when you're giving this speech, you had a lot of pride in this, because you felt happy that fellow women were actually showing the world that they can be in these positions.
Yes.
When you look back today, how does that make you feel, first of all?
I'm still proud because we don't occupy the same positions. Right now we have a speaker who is a woman. We have a minister of foreign affairs twice who is a woman. You know, you don't find it in many countries. So I could go on and on. Just that was a research paper. Now it's just, I can't remember everything now. But we have moved on occupying various senior positions in very strategic areas. So I've talked about foreign affairs, I've talked about the Speaker of Parliament, I've talked about, well, I'll talk about ombudsperson. That time it was a man, now the ombudsperson and her deputy are women. Well, you could go on and on. We have 50% of the governors are women. You know, so it's like, it's such that at one point we're occupying these positions, now we're occupying others. It's not.
So there's a shifting in
there's a
this,
shift,
and you still feel happy and
but
proud
the good
of that.
thing about the shift is that we're not going back into the traditional women positions, the social, the you know, going to the teaching, to the nursing. We're moving into areas that were previously very male-dominated.
Right.
Including in the Rwanda National Police.
Right.
From 2007, we moved from 3% now to 16%.
Right. Those are numbers, and earlier on you said we should look beyond the numbers. But
we should look, but since you are taking the argument of
Yes,
the number,
yes.
you should also know that in Supreme Courts today, half of the judges are women.
Yes. Right. And this brings the question of Mary, who on Twitter, who is actually saying the big question is, are women of Rwanda ready to influence? To our guests, what does it take? I think this is what she was asking. But of course, we will look at that in the next shows because of time limiting factors. We have to move. Moving forward, where do we go? Are we going to see, from the activism part, the push for more women to go for elective positions? What is the way forward as we look at this issue of women and power? And what happens when women, after having this empowerment, abuse that privilege? What happens in that sense? In very short
when they abuse, they do it equally as men do. So for me, it's not a question. Really for me, the key issue for women who have been elected is, one, to secure the gains. In the next elections, how are the women elected strategizing to secure the gains, not to slide back? Because today, what Rwandan women have done for themselves have gone beyond the borders. Sliding back would mean also disempowering other women elsewhere in the continent.
Right.
And
perfect. Olive,
yes, for me, as we move forward, let's continue securing the numbers we have, but let's also challenge the traditional patriarchy that really feels that women belong in the home, women are carers, women cannot be in elective positions or leadership or cannot stand strong. Let us really empower women so that they can feel they don't just have to be in elective positions or recruited positions. Right. They can also be leaders in their own communities. They can feel empowered enough in their homes not to feel violated in their homes, or to feel they actually have equal say in terms of what happens in their homes. So for me, that is the most important part in terms of leadership. Perfect.
Yeah. John feels that we should not talk about women positions. We need actions, not numbers. Moving forward, when you'll be asked next, not by me or by any other person, about actions and impact, what would you be telling, or what are you planning to do so that you can be able to have more answers?
Yeah, we shall continue being aware that we're being held, scrutinized as twice or even more than they are holding the other members, and we shall answer the call by going more to ensure that policy and law are being translated into practice, and we shall reach more to both the men and the women folk to talk more about the rights of women and how there's not yet a level playing field for in terms of their daily lives, their daily practices, their daily decision making, especially at household level, at community level. We're doing it at national level, but at community level and household level, there are still issues.
There's need to do more.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, ladies, for being the first guests on the premiere show of InFocus. It's a blessing because women run the world and they make the world go around. It was very deliberate that we had this particular topic for the appreciation of the role women play in this country and the rest of the world. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And of course, to you, our viewers who have been watching, asante sana for being a part of the first episode. One down, many more to come. Thank you so much. And of course, it feels great to be back home on RBA. And of course, we'll see you again on Sunday, 9 p.m. Hashtag is InFocusRW. The conversation doesn't end here. It continues on our social media platforms. We'll see you again next time. Same place. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.